I'm Glen Alford. I was Idaho State Sports Information Director for 31 years, from 1967 to 1998. Today I'd like to introduce you to my friend Phil Luckey, Idaho State's athletic trainer for 45 years on Storytime. When W. Holt was promoted to ISU Athletic Director in 1967, his first hire was Phil Luckey. I was his third. Phil was no stranger to Dubby. He is an ISU graduate. He ran on the ISU track team and cross-country team, and he's a member of the ISU Sports Hall of Fame. If you think I have a lot of stories, wait till you meet Phil. Phil began at ISU in the summer of 1960 when he and some friends hopped on a train in his hometown, Sandpoint, for the long trip to Pocatello to enroll in what was then Idaho State College. Take it, Phil.
Well, we arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was 8 of us. We went down to the Bannock Hotel, 3 blocks away, and we got in, and there was no rooms. So we're walking out the door, and I'm the manager, of course, so I'm holding the door open for all the athletes to walk out. And as they walked out, a group of people came in, and the last group in, this guy patted me on the shoulder and said, "Thank you, Sonny." And so I didn't think anything about it. I walked out and asked the driver, "Who was that?" He says, "Oh, that was John F. Kennedy." So the first person I met in Pocatello, Idaho was John F. Kennedy. So I thought, well, this is going to be a pretty good run. So that was the start of my story in Pocatello.
Kennedy was in Pocatello as a whistle-stop speech on his presidential campaign. Phil enrolled on a partial scholarship to be the track team manager, as he said, but as he watched the distance runners, he became dissatisfied and told Coach W. Holt that he could run as well as the distance runners, and he could.
Well, I don't know. There was one I couldn't beat. I mean, I always had to follow him, but he was kind of dumb, so he got lost a lot. So we were running all over town, and we became is still one of my best friends, and that's how we got started. And so I'd finish school, go down the training room, tape football, basketball, whatever, and then I'd get my shorts on and go run with the track team, come back in, take care of the athletes. And then Dubby got me a job, because I wasn't on scholarship, got me a job working in the student health center. And so then after I finished running, I had to go clean the student health center. And I did this for about 2.5 months. And for some reason, I don't know why, I had a mental breakdown. The next thing I knew, I was in Bannock Hospital. And I'm laying in the hospital, and Dubby came up to see me, and he says, "You know, you can't do this anymore." He says, "You're going to have to quit working." I says, "Well, Dub, I can't quit. That's how I'm getting through school." He says, "No, not anymore. You're on full scholarship now." So that's how I got put on scholarship, and the rest, that's the end of the story, I guess.
Well, it's not quite the end of it. Phil's senior year, he finished 30th in the NC2A cross-country championships. Phil is a member of the National Trainers Hall of Fame over his 45-year ISU career. He worked 467 consecutive Bengal football games. He also worked many men's basketball games, and he has a 1-0 record as ISU's head basketball coach. He picked up that victory in relief of Jim Killingsworth when ISU defeated the University of Pacific in December 1975 at the Hall of Fame tournament in Terre Haute, Indiana. And tell him how you got that W.
How I got it. my players went out and beat their players. So I don't know, that's how I got it. You know, but coming back in to the locker room, coach was waiting for us and come in, and we had a professor here, Jim Backus, and he had married Miss Idaho, and you know, they had moved back to Indiana. And so when I gathered up all the uniforms and everything, and I'm walking back to the locker room, and they're waiting for us at the locker room, and she comes up and gives me a big kiss, you know, and about had a heart attack, and Jim Killingsworth looked and says, "Geez, I won 500 games and I never got a kiss." So he was a little upset with me, but end of story.
Well, Phil had a 10-point lead when Killer got tossed, and we ended up winning by 16.
Yeah.
Side note, the coach at Indiana State was Bob King, who formerly was at New Mexico, and during the pregame luncheon, the pre-tournament luncheon, he said, "My team isn't very good right now, but I've got this redshirt freshman. He's going to be real good, and you're going to be reading about him." And we're all going, "Yeah, we've heard this before." Well, his freshman was Larry Bird, so we did hear about him. From 1973 to 77, ISU basketball featured 7-foot, 1/16 of an inch center Steve Hayes. Steve Hayes could cause problems for Phil with his height. Once Steve got poked in the eye, and Phil was jumping up and down trying to see into his eye while Steve was turning and twisting and put his hand over it. And the wise-ass public address announcer, me, said, "Is there a tall doctor in the house? Or two short ones?" When ISU started playing football in the mini dome, now Holt Arena, the goalpost bases were on the field, just like everybody else's goalposts. But Phil and mini dome maintenance director, the late Byron Robbie Robinson, are the reason the goalposts now hang from the ceiling.
Yeah, well, we had a real bad injury one of our kids' first year. He ran into the goalpost and got a really bad concussion and hurt really bad, and had to take him to the hospital and get all that done. And then that Monday, I came out and I was standing in the stands, looking down in the field, and I just got a kind of idea. So I went and got Robbie, and I said, "Robbie, do we have to have goalposts only 10 feet high? I mean, can they be higher?" And so we called the NCAA, and they said, "It doesn't matter as long as they're 10 feet off the ground, how high they are." So that's when we got the idea to hang the goalposts. So that was my contribution to Holt Arena, was hanging the goalposts from the ceiling. And it's worked pretty well.
Nobody's running the goalposts.
No one's running the goalposts since then.
No matter how tall they are. The first sporting event held at Holt Arena, now then the mini dome, was the 1970 spring football game. And head coach Ed Kavanagh decided to have his offensive and defensive coordinators coach the game, and he would go up on the catwalk, which is 108 feet off the ground, and he was observed from the catwalk. And didn't work out as he planned.
No, well, after the game, we went up in the locker room, everyone getting dressed and everything, and the reporters came in to interview Coach Kavanagh, and I couldn't find him. And so no one knew where he was, and so I started thinking, I wonder. So I came back down in the car and looked up, and he's sitting on the catwalk, hanging on for dear life, had not seen one play, had sat there. I yelled and yelled, no response. So I had to climb up the catwalk, get him, and literally walk him down all the way down the ramp and got down. We got off of the ramp, climbed down the ladder. He turned around and grabbed me by the throat, and he says, "If you ever tell anyone, I'll kill you." Well, he's gone now, so I can tell.
If he kills you, it'll be quite a story.
Well, he was fun. He was fun.
In Phil's 45-year career, he accumulated an amazing amount of memorabilia, most of it, but not all, related to athletics. This is just a small sample. For example, this is the bell that was on ISU's boxing ring. The bell would signal the end of rounds and the end of fights. ISU won 2 NC2A boxing championships, large schools, had 4 Olympic boxers, had many, many NC2A champions, and W. Holt, remember him, coached the 1956 U.S. Olympic boxing team. Phil appropriated this midnight bell acquisition.
Well, they're gonna throw it away. It was on the old ring in Reed Gym, and it was in the garbage. So I thought, well, they're gonna throw it away, I'll take the bell. So I took the bell. No one has complained. So.
This is the game ball from the 1981 National Championship football win over Eastern Kentucky. You can see, I don't know if you can zero in on that, but it says Eastern Kentucky, 1981. Phil borrowed this football from Eastern Kentucky.
I took it from the officials as walking off the floor.
This is the game ball from the 1977 win over UCLA, basketball. And Phil, who has an in with officials, talked them out of this.
Well, they didn't want it.
And we did. Some of Phil's stories have nothing to do with athletics. Take the time he got up close and personal with Bob Hope.
Well, Bob was doing a concert on Saturday, and I finished. We had spring football, and so I got home about 9 o'clock, and I got a phone call that they needed me at the Holiday Inn, and so I got dressed and went up the Holiday Inn, and the lady met me at the front desk and took me upstairs, and here's Bob Hope, and he needed a massage. So I reluctantly gave him a massage, and it was funny, when I finished, he fell asleep, and then he woke up and he looked at me and he says, "Well, do you need tickets for the concert tonight?" And I says, "Well, I don't think so." I says, "Once you've seen Bob Hope naked, what's left?" And he used that night in his performance and got a pretty good chuckle out of it, I guess. I don't know. But I didn't go to the concert, so I don't know.
This is the check that Bob Hope gave Phil. He still has it. Bob Hope wasn't the only celebrity that Phil was called upon to treat here, who was here for a concert. There was also Eddie Van Halen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Eddie fell down and needed to be taped. Who are they going to call?
Well, he was a very nice man, though, and taped him.
Phil had great running skills, as I've mentioned, and he used them as ISU's trainer. During games, he was noted for sprinting across the field or court to treat an injured athlete. This was never more notable or significant than when ISU's All-American football player Marcus Jackson was kneed in the head in a 1996 football game and was subsequently diagnosed with a traumatic spinal cord injury. I watched the film once. I've only been able to watch it once. And the video showed Phil and team physician Dr. Mickelson sprinting full speed from the sideline to where Marcus was lying while the play was still going on. They could tell that Marcus was hurt badly. When I was working in university relations, one of the last stories I wrote was a story about Phil. This is the cover of the magazine, and incidentally, this is Aquila Lacey, current Pocatello police officer. One of the stories in the ISU Outlook was a profile of Phil, and the second discussed his most memorable training cases. And of course, the injury to Marcus Jackson was one of those cases. It was an extremely difficult situation for me to deal with professionally, and I can't even imagine how difficult it was for the trainer and the team physician to deal with that. Phil, could you tell us about how you treated that injury from the time Marcus was injured until he was transferred out of Pocatello's hospital to go to Denver, to two hospitals that dealt with spinal cord trauma?
Very carefully. I mean, I really don't remember it because I have done a very good job of forgetting that part of it because it was so traumatic for me. You know, thinking about what happened to him and how he ended up. I remember more about when he came back after he had spent 2 years in rehabilitation and everything else, was completely paralyzed from the neck down. He came back for a game, and they brought him in the wheelchair, of course, couldn't walk, into the training room. And we sat in the training room, he and I, for probably an hour, crying, just the two of us. And when he left, he says, "Boy, I feel good." And so that, the end of the story, you know, it all put to rest.
Not all of Phil's memorable patients were athletes. Tom Whittaker was an ISU graduate student, an outdoor enthusiast, especially he was a mountain climber. He was from Wales, and in 1979 he was driving near Arco when his car was struck by a drunk driver, and subsequent injuries included amputation of one of his feet and loss of a kneecap. During his recovery in 1981, he established ISU's Cooperative Wilderness Handicapped Outdoor Group, CW HOG, and they provide outdoor recreation opportunities for those of all abilities. Phil, you were central to Tom's injury rehab, and please tell us about that.
Well, he would come in every day and we'd work out and hid in the weight room right above us. And then when we got the prosthesis on him, the one thing that we would do, he would run the steps. He would run all the way up to the top, and he'd get up there. And I remember one time he ran up there, and I could hear him screaming and yelling. And he says, "I'm on top of the world, I'm on top of the world." And well, he literally became the first handicapped person on top of the world. He climbed Mount Everest. And so he was one of my great accomplishments. I have to take credit for his rehabilitation, although no one else will give me credit. I'll take it myself. But he was one of the, and he was from Ireland, and he had an Irish. He was funny. He was a neat person. He worked at the university for several years afterwards, and I don't know what he's doing now, but
The last I heard, he was in Arizona, and he gives inspirational talks, which he is well suited to do.
Yeah. A very, very neat person.
Another memorable case was Mike Camacho, who never played a football game for ISU. He played only spring football in 1981, former All-State Highland High School linebacker. His career ended when a severed spinal nerve cost him significant use of his right arm. However, Mike, or more properly, Judge Camacho, or even more properly, El Diablo, deserves his own episode of Story Time. And maybe we'll accomplish that. He is currently a judge for Los Angeles County Superior Court. Previously, he was a 17-year member of the LA County District Attorney's staff who mainly prosecuted street gang members. They hated him so much, they called him El Diablo, the devil. Phil, what can you recall about Mike Camacho?
Well, the thing about Mike is he's local. He was born and raised here in Pocatello and was a local boy. Was not a great athlete. Never, of course, he never had the opportunity to be a great athlete because he got hurt so early. And but he ended up as one of the most respected people at Idaho State graduates that I know of. You know, and so got nothing to say but applause for Mike Camacho.
Kevin Rasco almost lost his leg in the only game he played at Idaho State. He was a highly regarded pass rusher who started the 1986 opener versus Chico State, but suffered a hyperextended knee early and was carried off the field in an ambulance. Phil, what can you tell us about Kevin Rasco?
I hate to say this, but I don't remember. I'm sorry.
How many injuries have you treated?
Oh, probably 1,000 or more.
Kevin,
Sorry.
Kevin was ambulanced to the hospital, which was then right across the street, and they had to operate on him several times to save his leg. Back then, I was doing a lot of jogging on the Reed Gym Rec Center rubberized surface, and a lot of times in the spring, Kevin and I were the only people in the rec center. I was jogging and he was starting out slow, and by the end of the spring, he'd never known that he had a leg injury. It's always a pleasure reminiscing with ISU's Hall of Fame trainer, Phil Luckey. Between us, we know where a lot of the bodies are buried at Holt Arena.
Yes, I do. Can I tell you where one is?
Phil may have even buried a few.
We had a ceremony for Coach Holt, W. Holt, when he died, and we had it up at Stevens Performing Arts. And he was obviously cremated, and so Glen and I both, we did part of the ceremony, and afterwards we had his remains. And Mike King, no, not Mike King, the dome man, I can't remember his name now. But anyway, we had it, and we came back to the dome and said, what are we going to do with these remains? So my question to you, where are they?
I'll never tell.
Should I tell him?
Might as well.
He has the biggest tombstone in Pocatello. Out in front of the dome, the sign, Holt Arena, that's where they're buried. Is that appropriate?
And his wife Jackie. They're both buried there. Can't top that. That's it for Story Time today. We'll see you all next month for another edition of Story Time.